Now, the ICAC's reputation is founded on a universalistic approach. It is, first of all, the successful reduction of corruption defined as bribery by means of prosecution. This is regarded as a fundamental premise. You are not going to dare to be corrupt, or you will be prosecuted. Second premise is the introduction of effective corruption prevention practices. That is, you will not be able to be corrupt because we will prevent you from being corrupt. And the third aspect, which is the one that interests me perhaps most, is the position of public education, of changing moral values so that people do not want to be corrupt. And some countries in the world have reached that position. Mr. Reddy was telling us about Singapore. I don't think Hong Kong has quite reached that position. Some of the Scandinavian countries have. But I think it should be an aspiration of every country that is serious about anti-corruption practices that public education should be one of the foremost points on the agenda. New forms of corruption present fresh challenges, and they call for innovative approaches. And we're now talking about forms of conflicts of interest, of money laundering, of various deferred advantages, such as employment after leaving public office. My questions are these. How does the ICAC attempt to deal with these new forms of corruption? Is its traditional approach, which I outlined earlier, still relevant? In what ways can it be supplemented? And is there potential in a bottom-up approach to corruption prevention? I turn now to new forms of corruption and ways of dealing with it. In 1997, China resumed sovereignty over Hong Kong, and at that stage, the means of combating simple bribery were quite effective. The new forms of corruption that were emerging include the following. Many of these don't have anything to do with the transfer of sovereignty. It just happened that they coincided. There were deferred advantages. That is, there were people who were taking up jobs in the private sector or in public companies in post-public employment. There were conflicts of interest, which were becoming much more prevalent. And there was, of course, cross-border corruption and money laundering. I'll deal with these in turn. In terms of deferred advantages, one of the things that has been done is that the rules have been tightened. And so you don't rely only on the rules. You try and improve the moral integrity of the public sector as well, and the private sector. You appeal to people's moral values as much as to their need to obey the rules. This offence, this is a legal offence in Hong Kong, misconduct in public office. It's an old common law offence. And it has been used in Britain for many, many years and was inherited by Hong Kong when it was a colony. And we have the English common law system. Under the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance, what was becoming clear is that some people were escaping conviction because it was becoming difficult to prove that they had actually received an advantage. So instead, this offence was resurrected in Hong Kong in 1998 and is now used to prosecute in cases where the ICAC feels that there may not be a sufficient case under the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance. Misconduct in public office is a very broad charge, and that means that lots of people can be brought before the courts under that charge who might not be convicted under the Prevention of Bribery Ordinance. And the ICAC has used this offence to represent a better chance of securing a conviction. To give you an example, if a civil servant awards a contract to a very distant relative it might be difficult to prove that he was or she was receiving an advantage. The relative might be receiving an advantage, but you could argue that it didn't quite fall under the ordinance. However, the civil servant would still be guilty of that offence under the misconduct in public office charge. And so it's used in that kind of way. Value-based integrity management is a new form of dealing with corruption as well. What we have in the Hong Kong government is in every department and bureau, there is a senior ethics officer. That person is responsible for the ethical behaviour of the government department. And that includes training and assuming responsibility for monitoring potential areas of corruption. So this person, as I say, very senior in the Hong Kong government, is actually spending part of their time dealing with anti-corruption measures in the department itself. And this has proved to be quite a successful innovation in terms of focusing on government departments and ensuring that their corruption prevention is up to date. The leading department in this respect is the police. The police have had this value-based integrity management for something like 15 years. It's done a marvelous job, I think, in improving the police force in Hong Kong. The police force was originally extremely corrupt. It is now a good community relations police force, and young constables are taught the values of integrity and honesty, and they are stressed very strongly within the police force itself. Thank you very much.